So it begins. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Uh, tonight's episode is actually very important for me personally. It's an episode where I have reached the resolution of maybe 5 years of effort. Before I get into the title, I need to share with you a personal story, the story of how these talks came into being. Um, in 2011, I was a totally different person than the values I hold now. I was more of a cruel and arrogant person. And then certain transformations came, certain questions came and broke the worlds I was living in. And eventually in 2014, I decided upon, for some reason, I saw a vision in my mind at just an instant. It was like an instant glimpse where I just saw, it's as if with the name Mr. Within, I have to give 10,000 talks, right? It was like a glimpse. And there was something about that vision I'll never forget that it just made me start just sitting down and start recording. In 2014, I was in UK, Birmingham. I was studying mechanical engineering at that time, and something very unique happened where I found myself studying engineering in the day and at night being drawn towards more existential matters. And so I remember it started. There was this bench in the United Kingdom in the city of Birmingham. This accommodations area I was staying at called Curzon Gateway. I think the building's completely destroyed now. It's become something else. But so I remember going outside and sitting on the yard, and for the first time picking my phone and bringing a title and speaking about it. It felt like very, very strange at first, but I felt like there was something. It's as if I kind of considered like the same an expression the person has for art. Well, what if they have it for words, right? So I started, in some sense, speaking about what felt to me was something of importance. And so I started giving the talks, and at first I remember there was no, I had no, it was just the phone in my hand and just me talking. And then in the evolution of it, I bought headphones. I had these, you don't know how many talks I gave with just Apple headphones. You know, my budget was low at the time, and so it's like, I remember, but it was one of those things where I just started doing something that I felt was important. It's as if I'd seen something in my life that made me feel like doing that. So endlessly at night, I would even reach certain days when I had days off where I remember it was like one day where I spoke for like I gave 8 talks. It was like more than 8 hours, and I came back and I just sat down and just it's like I refresh my mind with stillness and silence. This is something I'm trying to get across in these talks. But anyways, guys, I'm just, before even getting into the talk hasn't started yet. I'm just giving a preview of, like, giving you a kind of origin. This doesn't happen often in the talks. I'm just sharing how all this came about. Believe it or not, the name Mr. Within, I was using it before I started the YouTube channel on my SoundCloud, and I would scope through like thousands of songs, like my likes on my SoundCloud page was like above 11,000 or something, right? So it was like I would scan through a lot of different kinds of music. Um, hey Jay, I feel maybe it'd be nice. This is a special episode compared to the other ones. So maybe I recommend sticking around, and at any point you don't feel like it, of course, tune into something else. But the talk hasn't started yet. I'm just giving a preview. If you're new to the channel, then you're hearing the story live. Sorry, guys, I was talking to the chat section, responding to the chat section. Anyways, I found myself being pulled towards what? What felt like to me the most unknown option at the time. It felt like there was no there was no social reason, there was no reason for me to just sit down and speak. I feel what it was a sort of wonder. It was weird. It was like trusting the wonder of a moment, and as you do, a sort of archetype appears, a sort of image of self appears that keeps continuing. And I began, in some sense, in the middle of the talks. At first, they were kind of like just me sharing. But then it reached a point where I began questioning my blueprint of existence. I began wondering. I went to the edge of what I felt I knew. And I came to realize something profound in the middle of these talks, in these couple years that I've been giving these talks, that the relationship we as human beings have with language is too much in the unconscious. They don't teach children about a subjective evolution. They don't tell people how to treat their mind. The mind is like a myth, a legend told to you in a story. Yeah. It's like, where's my mind? It's like, only legends know. I started communicating, and eventually ideas are born out of intention. So, in the middle of all these talks I was giving, I became an audience member of myself to a point where I notice it's like everything I say, I'm also hearing. And I think it's like that with everyone else, but it's like people don't pay attention to it, that they are an observer of their own action. Sometimes there's a guilt that arises, which is strange because it arises because the person failed to act when there was an impulse within them to do so. You see, we are natural beings. And I kind of felt like we are reaching a point in history where we have to communicate our inner realms in ways that our ancestors could not. We have literally access to things right now, as the modern man, that we are not using. Very simple things, as if like there's worlds behind people's eyes, and Mr. Within is just saying, hey, share. Hey, 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, maybe share what's going on behind your eyes, because the species is very data driven. The systems now are data processors. I'm treating pretty much the whole civilization right now like a machine, because it's treating the human being like a machine. But I'm telling you, it's one of those things where when civilization shifts, um, it will be by the effort of those who are alive now. So it's like, sorry to break it to you, but because you're alive, you must become responsible for your civilization. But how? And that's the part where the advanced communicators and the pilots of consciousness of the future generations will kind of crystallize. But we are kind of like the imagine like you're like pioneers kind of like settling and like chopping trees. Imagine that's like one way that the system was kept. But now we kind of see it's like they did the first action thousands of years later. Their memory was the guide. So what it is we have to kind of, as a species, wonder what memory are we leaving for the future generations. So so in ever since in 2014, these talks I've been called to, and they've been ones where I notice I've written something I should have probably shared earlier. Before giving these talks, I like since childhood I was a really shy person. shy and quiet, content but shy and quiet. And I remember the first kind of free flow of expression came was in writing for me. So I found from, I think it was starting from 2010 and onwards, the sort of this, I went on this kind of like something happened that I went on to in this writer frenzy where I was not writing. Um, at that point, I was just expressing. I was just fascinated how much the mind has taken in and it's waiting for an expression threshold to be reached, you know? So I wrote a lot. I wrote a lot of stuff, and I had this very unique system where I completed like bunch of books at the same time. It's pretty easy. Pretty much write one page of as many different kinds of books you want, but really sit down and write them. So my sort of strangely my inner voice found a way out into the manifest world through writing. And I went into this point where I was writing poetry, but it wasn't like like roses are red, like violets are blue. Like it wasn't like that. It wasn't love poems. It was existential. It was as if like I had taken Thor's hammer and I was slamming down on my reality with each line a sort of it was kind of very unique. Sometimes when I write, I'm not if I kind of playfully say if I'm upstairs, what that means is if I'm my whole moment, data moves differently. Anyways, so through that kind of silence, I found my writer's voice, or I found my inner voice. Like every human being has a style. Like if every human being right now decided to write and was serious about it, you know, that human being will eventually find a voice on the page. At first, it may be too structured, but eventually you'll realize the value of the new and you will attempt it. So what I'm saying is something I gotta share so we start the talk. The talk hasn't even started yet, you know. Um, Pretty much, guys, in these couple years, I eventually wondered if I incarnated in the eyes of the future generations, what kind of world did I have to deal with? I began wondering, constantly seeing, okay, objects are phenomena that you can look at subjectively from various angles. So it was as if my mind was first looking for the question. And the question, it took an experience to kind of come to that ultimate question. I find every heart has an ultimate question, you know? So every being comes with a question and an answer. Now, their answer depends on their fearlessness to respond. Their question depends on their fearlessness to, in some sense, wonder, right? The mind is here, so you are more than just an object in a room. So the question I asked, there was a question that was kind of like it came from so within. That it was the ultimate question. I attained it when I experientially broke. I had a sort of realization as I was walking in like downtown. I was walking in downtown Toronto, and for a second my mind entertained and said, okay, in this moment I will walk as if I'm an alien on earth, as if it's my first time on this earth, as if it's the first time my eyes have opened. And I watched, and you know what I saw? I saw humans with robotic minds. And it was strange. It was as if, like, that story they say where the mule has a carrot, like, and a stick and a string attached to the carrot in front of them, and the mule just goes towards it and it can never reach it. It felt like an mental cage. what I felt was civilization's greatness. I went and saw it, and I'm like, this is a mental cage. I saw the stores, I saw the streets. And I'm not just, Canada is a very, very evolved country, incredibly evolved country. But I am saying if Canada looks like this, guess what the third world look like? The developing countries look like. So what does that mean? That means man's mind has not found a moment to ask itself, why is this here? So I was wondering, what is the resolution to 8 billion minds that will probably be chaotic if there's nothing changed about how the system's going? What that means is overpopulation is not just the presence of a body, but it is the presence of a mind. A mind that can, in some sense, ask questions and also provide solutions. Really, we can't solve problems without consciousness, guys. It's so basic. So let me tell you, I wondered about what is pretty much I came to a point where the ultimate question was asked when I forgot about my past and I forgot about the future and I looked at what's happening now. And when I realized what the question was, the ultimate question was to have your attention on what will happen next. I wondered civilization as if an aftermath of the Tower of Babylon story, segmented creatures, just like how like primitive beings colored their faces with paint. Every citizen of a nation is coloring their face with a sort of image and idea. We are creatures that are living in many abstract universes all the time. Law is abstract, time is abstract, the future is abstract. And yet we only want to see evidence of that which is objective. It's like, it's very fascinating. Underneath all, when I say all, I mean all. Underneath all designs, there is the simple presence of an emptiness. This emptiness's simple presence is like the being has already acknowledged space. You have already acknowledged that leaves fall as the seasons pass. So now I guess it's a good point to start the talk, because my resolution was that it was emotional stability. This question of I realized this whole time that I've been giving these talks that what I was looking for was, what should a collective human vision do? And I thought it was just advancement through technology, a sort of linear. It's like you can say Napoleon's mindset was linear. It's like one goal he wanted, he got. Okay, it's one pointed. It's like a sniper. So I was like thinking in that moment in my life, like, all right, what is the solution? And it is not just a technological advancement. I realize we are creatures that become irrational when we emotionally shift. So because we're emotional creatures, having the right idea, it doesn't matter. You go to some idea. I call them like you go to a certain school of thought and they, stamp you with a certain thought. Like, it doesn't matter. We're all playing ideological costume games with the moment. We're all shaping things to have meaning. So this talk I'm saying is that this is what I realized. The reason emotional stability is the next great kind of Rubik's Cube of civilization to solve for the future generations is because emotions, how can I tell you? They are when a world gets out of one room and goes to the next, when the attention gets out of one room and goes to the next. You can say without memory, there is no emotion. There's no consciousness of emotion. Imagine 8 billion creatures on a rock in a light beam, on a pebble in a light beam. Imagine these 8 billion creatures realizing there is too much emptiness. But what does that mean about what is here? It means 8 billion creatures immediately realize that they are born out of that which has no reference prior. You are eyes that open on the earth for the first time and never forget it. In this life, chaos and order arrive. It's as if a certain class of civilization is trying to shelter the eyes of the youth and the eyes of the lovers of the world, but at the same time, it's as if war never ends. Evolution never ends. And evolution is not a physical war no more. No longer man has to be violent. It's immediately called. You know? It was as if a person touched a tree and realized man has to stop declaring war against nature. What does that mean? That means trust the simple trees. Trust the fact that there can be survival and efficiency if man doesn't return to nature. We don't want to go back in the food chain, but we want to at least study the nature of our planet. So, anyways, what I'm saying is that every person who is alive, every person who has ever lived, every person who will live, they will realize at some point their subconscious psychology is reacting to emptiness. This is why greed exists. This is why fear exists. Because that ultimate emptiness is not lurking. It's like death is not coming. It's as if life is born in death. In non existence, existence has opened its eyes. So, in other words, I realized after all this time of constantly thinking, I thought language, language was the main catalyst for civilization. I realized this like a long time ago, but I never knew that. I thought it was language that was the issue. I realized no, it's a totally emotional justification, and emotions are in accordance to how the person is reacting to the environment. So, if every human being became more abundant, we had a system of resources globally. So imagine in the abundance of the human being, what occurs? Freedom, inner freedom. What is this inner freedom? An allowance to reinterpret the system. It's kind of like this kind of tragedy and comedy, where it's as if the person is trying to fit into a system his whole life, not realizing that the system evolves. And it's as if like that whole time you could have evolved the system. Now, the system is not something that needs to be changed by the ideas of one man. It needs data. It needs literally like when a civilization cares for its government will heal. If the citizens don't keep their nations in high honor, it's as if, why is that even a respectful position? It's like the failure of government is when nobody wants to be president. And that's an issue because eventually life requires, you have to navigate these ships that at some point will eventually integrate. It's like, who are we kidding? We're playing like theatrics with this United Nations. It's all one planet, one rock. It's language that really becomes the world, isn't it? So freedom is instantaneous to some degree, but on some level we are reacting to emptiness. And this is why those people who get humbled, embarrassed, defeated, rejected in the world have a strange strength at the end of days. Because they have noticed emptiness. So this is the thing. Imagine, like, look at how well, guys, this sentence, this title is like, we're all reacting to emptiness. Just think about it. You go talk to someone on the street. You go talk to someone in a penthouse. You go talk to someone who's the leader of nations. You go talk to someone who is in some sense so weak that they cannot speak. And you see many avenues of life. They're reacting to emptiness. And this is why Dalai Lama had kind of strangely, I think he didn't even understand it fully, but I think I mean, of course, he's a very wise man, but he had gotten the lottery ticket. Maybe the Tibetan Buddhist wisdom knew it all along, you know. But it was like that man has to be compassionate, just like how you have to water a plant. It's called the great universal patience law. Any being that is conscious, they have to observe first before responding. I looked at everyone I ever knew, every image of others in my mind. I noticed that we all know we have stepped out of emptiness and we will return to emptiness. It's just that there comes this panic, what should I do? And the issue is the individual has not been given enough strength. What that means is the citizen is lost to a machine-like habit. That means I find it's like people have to be careful. Mechanical ideas can inhabit your mind. Lockdown images, snapshot photos of reality can convince you there's nothing else. But realize that the nature of the world can be found in the wind. It can be found in the fire. It can be found in the air. It can be found in the earth. It can be found in the ether of space. We are an advanced civilization because behind our eyes we can see one. And we are all reacting to emptiness, which means right now in 2019, we don't have that much evolved technologies. So what it is the greatest utilization of the storytelling age. What is drawing people's minds is in their in like um, repetitive lives, they are finding suddenly loops like entertainment becomes a way out. As if imagine making your species thirsty on purpose so they want to drink more or something. Reality can be cruel, but the mind of man can see beyond it and it will move beyond it. So if it just think of how intense life is for you, and now realize there's 8 billion others who could potentially have more even intenser lives than your less intenser lives. So how do you look at those who have experienced less of a harsh intensity of the planetary behavior? You can say it's like every person's eyes in their conscious state in accordance to where they go. It's kind of fascinating, guys. Our minds are moving at speeds that are making our bodies overworked. But when our bodies become overworked, because the will dares to continue, it means eventually we will require an instrument that moves faster. So it's as if the mind is moving so fast, it can't just be contained in a biological body. So potentially in the future generations, it may be a technological addition, or it may be something else. I don't know. Maybe it's as smooth as nanotechnology, kind of like evolving all technology, you know? But I don't know. I think it's not about playing in with the sandbox. It's also important to wonder why you're there. Why this sort of framework of existence. Do you know how cool this is? That means imagine all the superheroes in all the stories of the world, in all the comics, even those heroic beings in all mythologies. We're not excluding any. All stories where there were archetypes of greatness. Why are they all here? Why is such sophisticated design standing today? Why is it after 4 billion years something called civilization has arose? And we open our eyes in it and it's so easy to forget it and just hide. Hide in a dream. Let me tell you, if there's something called a dream, that means instantly there's a state that's outside of the dream. That means the illusion cannot exist without the truth. The truth and the illusion are no longer definable by each other. The mind steps out of that dualistic wheel of thought. You free yourself from guilt that was never there, and from, in some sense, hate that was never there, and all the archetypes of anger in your mind bow down. And what are they bowing down to? To the advancement of not just the body of man, but the mind of man. It's as if I won't be surprised that we have nowhere left to go. It's like we need a global discussion of all the greatest minds in the world on this. We have to create School of Athens 2.0, where it is the global digital, in some sense. How can I tell you? It's where the minds of people can, in some sense, envision. You see, the body, you sure it picks up a weapon, but the mind picks up language and, like a lens in front of a light, projects it. That means in your subjective realms, there's so much more freedom. But based on how you were raised, you either have honor or you don't. And what is honor? I've noticed this, and it was like as a kid being raised in Iran. I mean, till a young age, then I came to Canada. I will tell you, both nations lacked honor. Both nations had pride, but both nations lacked honor. And there was something strange that my mind, of course, from an outsider, kind of looked at Japanese culture, and I wondered, it's like, what is this honor game? What is this constant honor, honor, honor? And I thought, like, could there be, like, kids in Japan who are just trapped in this cycle of endless honorhood, right? And then I eventually realized, no. It's like that sense of respecting anything in your moment gives freedom. It's like, give freedom, you get it back. This is why honesty in Japanese society is like its aroma has lingered longer than many other societies, I think. And what it means is we all realize we're temporary. Guess what? At least perform right. Enjoy it's like the opportunity of being a creature in the middle of nowhere. Hey, what can you do? So my quest of 5 years, getting close to 6, has come to the resolution that if the civilization was a collective being and asked itself, what should I do? It would be to emotionally make the human being stable. All human beings. That means it's like you don't know. It's like just because somebody doesn't, people are in armor, wearing armor every day. Deep down, it's like, of course, there's imperfection everywhere. It's like people acting as if life is not hard is like, guess what? You are tasting your own fruit. What I mean by that, it's like you're somebody who has an orchard of apples, and somebody comes there and he's like, "Hey man, how do those apples taste?" And you're like, "These apples taste great," and it's like you haven't tried any other apple. These apple are the best in the market. Of course, we have to always be playful to the explorer's ego because it has gone through a long journey. So it's as if eventually life, I could totally understand the Stoics who thought that behavior was a path to truth. And behavior had to do with an acknowledgement of true value, real value. When you realize every human being is reacting to emptiness, what that means is they're subconscious, they're either freaking out or they're content with it. And that contentment with emptiness is the ultimate experiential maturity. So if you're a person in this life where you have experienced chaos, or you have even experienced the chaos of looped order, you will at some point realize the eyes of man are not just here as atoms in space. Intelligence is like a beam received. It's like, guess what? Our imaginations are all solar powered. Did you know? I could totally understand why the ancient Egyptians worshipped the sun, because without it, what else was there? So light, source, individuality, singular, all of it came in through the eyes of man. Let me tell you what the story of mankind is. That light entered the eyes of an evolutionary creature and reflected back into the cosmos as the greatness of human civilization. Greatness is not out of reach. It is not, it's as if we are just, again, we are in the pioneer stage. I find everybody who's listening to this talk, maybe this is crucial to know. It's like I'm saying this, like, I don't know, YouTube is here, this channel is here, these ideas are here. I would say the next phase of civilization requires every human being not to only be aware of their objective realm, but to be aware of their subjective realm. Now comes the time. That means as you go through the day, be aware there's a presence, an energetic presence of attention that is you. And then recognize where your attention is. You see, sometimes you gotta move limbs you haven't moved for a while. And that means that the mind has to endlessly animate. And you see, most people are actually revealing what has built up inside them as a creature. And the creature could be said to be a container of objective and subjective phenomena and shapes and designs. But there's something more. And this takes me back to the idea of what I call like how I feel the subjective evolution occurred. So right now I'm speaking to a mainstream that doesn't even acknowledge the subjective evolution. They're like, mind? Imagine it's your imagination, human being. You have a mind, it's all electrons. And you'll be like, excuse me? It's like first we thought we were an ape, then we thought we didn't exist. How hilarious has civilization become? It's all about awareness and self and the relationship they have with each other. There's a term in the Vedic tradition called Satchit Ananda. Conscious existence is bliss. So, as if once you see this emptiness, your mind is also finally ready to see the ultimate fullness. And when it sees the ultimate fullness, it means every archetype that the mind has harbored as a field suddenly attains its purpose, realizing that the void, it's as if like once you see you did something in the past, once you see it again, you feel you could do it again. So in the void of the new, you can implement the action. We are honestly tunneling through space and time as storytellers that are bringing these stories back to the tribe. I find strangely a global culture is going to arise where it's going to be a strange, imagine entering a building, and in that building nobody, every human being is acknowledging that there is a mind here, an unknown mind regardless of the known body. So suddenly imagine in what high regard the world begins to be kept. It's like the issue is not that we made a mistake, oh my God. The issue is that why has it not changed? Why has weakness, if the mind has an ability to see a weak self, does it not have also an ability to see a strong self? You know, that's the designer's freedom. You know, I understood the power of design to such a degree, guys, that I got to just talk about really quickly. You know, I'm kind of going with the flow of the moment, but in this science fiction novel, I have this character named Farda who suddenly is in a life and death situation, and before he dies, right, suddenly the whole moment stops and everything turns into geometrical lines of light. And then this kid, who's like this divine kid in the story, finds himself in a room with the archangel of geometry. The archangel of geometry is in some sense this character I've made, where he's in some sense the soul of the geometrical dimension. So he's this character that he has a face, but the rest of his body is like just weaved in with the geometry of the moment. You know, that was kind of like a sort of vision I'm telling you. So there was a sort of, in the emptiness of that temporal view, there came a geometrical eternal opening. Hopefully I'll be able to publish some chapters of this sci-fi stuff I'm doing. So anyways, guys, the call to for emotional stability, it has a bunch of kind of tasks ahead for civilization. I'm just assuming some people in the future, will come to care for what I'm saying. So maybe they might just not even care for it, but hear it. At least the idea opens in the eyes of the species. As Victor Hugo says, nothing is more powerful than an idea in which its time has come. And Mr. Within will say, now, right now, is when the creature's relationship with its objective being and subjective being have never been this updated before. Like we are at the epitome of a sort of, we are looking at the world in ways that our very, very far ancestors couldn't fathom. They couldn't even imagine. It was denied even to their imaginations. So matter has evolved into thought. Thought has evolved into a story. A story has evolved into the character focusing in on itself. The character has evolved in realizing the character is existing in a world. So immediately, like imagine if you just landed on this planet and opened your eyes, like you would immediately be aware of the external existence of the reality. You would see how matter is being. The laws of nature must be honored and respected. And what that means is you must just like how people take their shoes off in temples, when you go into nature, you should take off your ego. You should take off any sort of idea you have and just walk in nature. Eventually, hopefully, remembering your nature. To be honest, there was this park I would go to, and I would sit still and silent among the trees, and I just wondered, what if I eternally just sat here? I just had that kind of playful thought, and I realized that it's all about the mind, remembering that it's here. So the reaction to emptiness is people going into emotional turbulence, subconsciously even, and this subconscious emotional turbulence is making us hide from this cold truth of reality. And because we're trying to hide from it, we are jumping into a kind of very safe civilization, politically correct civilization, not realizing that we are blocking the attention of the future generations from the true exploration that needs to happen now. Yeah, yeah. Great question, Deva Chandra 9. So guys, I'm responding to the chat now. Exactly. What I mean by that is it's not an objective emptiness. It's not like I'm telling you the room you're in is not here. I'm telling you that, imagine if the mind was a copy of the subjective self. You know how people see in movies the idea of the soul, like this kind of copy of the self in a more ether kind of like it's as if, like, if it was on Photoshop, the opacity was like 50%, or maybe 70%. Like, you know what I mean by that? It's as if the same way people have an idea of a soul, I'm saying forget the soul. Now imagine that every person has an idea of a self. So this body is being inhabited by an attention that is feeling, it's a sort of character or person or subjective image. So this is because if you are not raised to realize that you have a distance with thought, you will get possessed by thought. To get possessed by thought sometimes is necessary to release emotion. And sometimes, if you're a creature that's been kind of strict on yourself, you forgot to give yourself the freedom that you always could. Like, there will always be moments like that in the mystical journey where there will be existential regrets. But those existential regrets are just constant slams against the door, where it's as if there is one idea lingering behind your eyes that is keeping you here. And I realize it's like yin and yang. You can't it's like, let me say it like this: even though I say we're all reacting to emptiness, I'm suggesting to a subjective emptiness. Do you know? And that subjective emptiness is, I'm saying we are subconsciously reacting it. I'm not even saying consciously people are aware of. People are like, yeah, I'm here, life, let's go, you know? And that's great, and we should continue that spirit. And that's not an illusion, but I'm just saying the bigger picture requires us to realize a sort of inevitability. So our value and resource becomes the breath in each moment. Do you see? So it's as if the civilization realizes, okay, if we want to get together and build an advanced civilization, we don't have time to really think of our own egos, where we're trying to, for the first time, the most unthinkable, building the ego of a civilization. As if it's like those, of course, we're individual beings, we require our individual freedoms. But I'm saying it's like trying to place the first bricks, on a road towards a civilization where uh the subjective emptiness causes us to become emotionally unstable, and because it's subconscious, we feel we'll never understand why our emotions happen. So, what does that mean? That means taking responsibility for your inner emotional instability. What that means is awakening to the realization that, guess what? Freedom, whether it was told to you or not, it was so common sense that because you are here once, you're allowed to be free. But it's also, you're allowed, also, there's the option of trying to see why this civilization is here. And I feel right now we're going towards a sort of inner renaissance, which means human beings are finding themselves eventually comfortable and more comfortable to express themselves, you know? So this comfort of expression means a sort of subtle advancement in communication. And especially as technologies evolve, stories begin building around these technologies. So the future has a kind of, like, there's a backup of nature, where deep down the dynamism of keeping the body moving makes us alive. So what that means is, if the world, we can't just, I say we are reacting to emptiness to handle the emotional instability, by bringing emotional stability, and I think the only way to do it is actually the person has to look in a mirror or be told such a great story that in their inspiration for a new archetype awakens. I feel like it's not about right or wrong anymore. It's about what is the most efficient vision instantly accessible. And efficiency means maintaining individual freedom as there is the emergence of collective movements. So the best thing the human being can do is, I find, to cultivate their inner life and come to a contentment with it, and then function in the external life and play a role, become a chess piece in the game of life. It may feel unnecessary, but the being who's kind of aware, the being who has climbed the mountains of the inner realm, will have no problem walking in the climbing the mountains of the external realm. You know, like, I'm not joking. No problem that being would have. Once there's certain inner movements that may occur where the attention recalibrates, and it's like an animal awakening from hibernation. It's like a part of your intelligence that was always there, that it was as if it was not being considered. As long as there's someone asking a question, there isn't emptiness. But I'm telling you, the idea is, is not just emptiness. It's like you're a natural being and your eyes start from your DNA. So I want you to understand right now, even though I'm responding to you, Deva Chandra, 9, even though I'm responding to you, we have to understand that we are starting from our inner realities. That means just think about it. Every human being born is like a creature. It's being taught certain things. It has no choice. The parents are not just spoon feeding it food, the child. They're also spoon feeding its mind patterns of behavior based on how behavior is shown in front of the child, some eyes, right? So the child is an opening mind. It hasn't fully opened, but it's an opening mind. So what it opens up to, it takes impressions of. It's kind of being like a sort of law to make sure that when the caterpillar steps out of the cocoon, when the eyes of the future generations open, there isn't a hostile impression of the world. You know, it's like, what can you do in an apocalyptic moment? You can smile. Smile to realize you saw it all. There's something incredible in life that it calls one to express their design. Now, something's complex, so I gotta kind of say it like this. There's a sort of labyrinth of a combination of cultural programs, social programs, behavioral programs, and every human being has them. Now, these are not things that the person should get rid of. These are not qualities that should be forgotten or like, oh my God, let me purify myself to enlightenment. It's like, sure, you know, but change is the ultimate fire that cleanses all. There's a story that comes to us from Vedanta, and the story is of the two birds. And what is this story? What does it mean? It's like there's this tree, and it has these two branches, and the on the bottom branch there's a bird, this incredibly beautiful bird, but this beautiful bird is working its whole life. It hasn't even had time to look at its reflection in the mirror. It's been just working endlessly, non-stop, till the day this bird's gonna die. It's just so occupied. Everything is action oriented in reality. Now the second bird on the top branch is the same bird, but this bird is looking down and is seeing the bottom branch, and at the same time it is still and it has never moved. And it was the inspiration that these two metaphors are suggestions of states of mind. I mean, of course, you can bring in the brain hemispheres in and give them some sort of profound um, parallel meaning to what I'm saying right now. But it's one of those things where the mind has an ability to completely acknowledge emptiness and be okay with it, and then has also an ability to acknowledge fullness, and whether the fullness changes, also to be able to acknowledge it. You know? My greatest kind of attempt at kind of conceptualizing what's going on with the minds of people, not just the bodies. You can say evolution has conquered the story of the body. It's as if, like, beyond evolutionary science and biology, I don't know what is everything else is uncommon, I think, uncommon sense. We have to realize the eyes of the species are open now. Every person, a unique design. My advice is immediately write a book about what all of your life has come to, and then give that book to the world, and then run to live again. Run to live again. Because life is changing all the time, you know? And there's something I call language worship, which after idol worship, guess what? We started worshiping language, and guess what? We still are. And right now, it's come to a point where I'm like, okay, it's no longer worshiping language. Language has become the fundamental technology that has evolved civilization. So, if anything that attempts to attack the ego, it's as if now the soul is defending the ego because it is it has become the gears of civilization. This is why spirituality has always kept its distance from too much words. But some moments, the lion has to roar. Just think of everybody. So I remember hearing this kind of ancient saying where somebody said everybody's fighting a battle you can't see, and I was like, whoa, whoa. That means the greatest warrior I've seen in my life, the greatest person I've seen in my life, even they were fighting a battle I couldn't see. And it made me realize why honoring the civilization that is putting an attempt and effort to be here is important. And eventually is not honoring people's mind, but honoring the development of individual designs in somehow becoming part of a collective system. You see, it's kind of unavoidable, right? Because I'll tell you what happens when an individual, conscious, objective, known being, gets bored. It jumps to the opposite. A collective conscious unknown. And the unknown is very crucial. The unknown is something where it must be honored in the sense like the x in the equation, in that mathematical equation was divine. The unknown x factor was divine. It was like a divine door of thought, a divine door of value. You couldn't see beyond that door. You know, life is not about seeking endless instruction booklets on how to live the moment. You see, this is the issue. People have been too conditioned to think they have to fit into a story. And I'm here talking about we need a new collective story. Like, I'm telling you this, guys, life is incredible. Life becomes even more incredible when you realize everything you're seeing has to do with your experiences. So once you confront your own inner experiences, like you sit down in one moment and you're like, okay, I'm in this life once. How much do I want my past being constantly in my attention? And what it is honor the past, respect it, and just keep it like 2% of your attention in the day to the past. But that 2% is more important than everything else. It's not more important than everything else, but it shouldn't be forgotten. It's as if there are certain beacons passed down in certain cultural programs that must be carried on. It's like something the kid who disrespected his parents. Imagine some kid who decided to be a thug in Japan. He came to his parents and he's like, I no longer want to be, I'm a thug, like da da da. He's leaving. And he's like, I don't want to dishonor you anymore, parents, I'm leaving. And the parents kind of look at the kid as if their minds are dishonored for their own failure. But at the same time, the father is like, then who will pass the torch? And that becomes the chaos of life, you know and it has to do with communication. And so what it means is, this is what I noticed: the common denominator, human beings, there's two things that are like our common denominator, universal to all minds, all human minds. One, we all share the same unknown. We all look at the same endless sky. The second thing is, right now, in this moment in history, 2019, we are creatures that no longer are dressing ourselves up in clothing, but we are dressing ourselves in communication, language, and archetypes in various moments. And a lot of our emotional relationships, I think, have to do with what sort of value is going around in the moment. But for me, it's like the evolution of an animal into a field of intelligence. That's what I think is happening. Some have even predicted that it becomes more silent. I have thought that the educational system will suddenly seem like an illusion to the student. The educational system would be seen as a house of cards instantly breaking. Not because the educational system did anything wrong, but because language is hovering in the air between our fingers. So I thought reacting to emptiness, what does that mean? That means I stopped becoming like, I don't want to say it like this. It's like a part of me that thought life was a mighty intellectual approach. When I say intellectual, I mean just caring to ask the questions, the deep questions, caring to see some what others haven't subjectively, you know. Regardless of any sort of enlightened instant of experience, one will eventually wonder, why is the design here? And I think the great inspiration for life comes from that, where you acknowledge the void, you become content with it, so you stop freaking out, and then the mind can truly perform. You see, life can always be chaotic. Like two people can stand on a bus stop, and a bus stop peacefully comes, and they go sit in the bus stop, but those two beings' minds could totally experience it differently. Imagine one of them, possessed by pride, enters the bus stop, making sure everybody knows he's there. Do you know? And then you see, for example, the other possessed by fear, and the person quietly goes and like stumbles and just sits somewhere. And eventually you realize, what are these dances in the wind? Simulations of like those people's subjective realms. What is truly going on? And I realized language is literally like a way we have reached for the unknown as a species. So it's as if I'm telling you, it's like language is the most important thing to study, and eventually realize a lot of knowledge has to do with direct experiential kind of vision rather than subjective landscapes. Of course, in these talks, I paint pictures, but I'm telling you this, that we are all reacting to emptiness in the sense that, like, we all know there will come a moment where the elegance of this body, it's as if the atoms that have served your consciousness and being you your whole life, their duty is finished, and you are in some sense saying goodbye to the troops, you know. And as your existence in some sense dismantles, there comes a moment where the mind will have to consider the unknown and the non-existence, and oh my god, my laptop's about to die. Hold on, guys, hold on. There we go. It's just about like there's an existential opportunity and the effort needs to be made. And if it's not being made, then our ancestors are going to be like, really, guys? Really? The good thing is that the human species, like we all have a sort of how can I tell you? The human design is our common field. I realized that, like, I'll give you an example. If before I would go into a space, I would just have this just instantly go in. Like, I don't know why. I think, like, because in my youth I was shy, and the reason I think I was shy is because I was overwhelmed by the world too early. I don't know if something happened like traumatic before I was even conscious of my personality as a child. But I just know that there was like when my eyes opened to the world, there was a fear of movement. And later on I realized it wasn't a fear of movement. It was as if I was taking too long to scan. So what I mean by that is eventually that cultivated into a viewpoint where I stopped acknowledging my sight to just be my eyes. I would become my moment. How can I say it? I would be too simple in the moment. And you don't know, I have been the simple fool of many moments. What I mean is, there was a moment in this UK University of Birmingham, there was this yard, and it was like a busy school, and I just went and sat and in the middle of that yard and closed my eyes. And I just sat there. I sat there as if I don't, all right, time is like I'm not busy. And I just sat there, in that kind of stillness, to a point where I eventually saw that people were kind of coming and sitting in the park. It was like this grass field, and as I was just sitting down in the park, I saw people coming and sitting in the park, in the grassland. And I'm telling you, there's something strange. Not that when you fight a system, but you stop the inefficient. And there's something where many people in this life have a fear of saying no. Let me tell you why that fear of saying no comes. Because deep down in their mind, they're trying to save. They're trying to save an archetype. Life is incredible, and it's in our attitude that it gets dimensions. Now, your attitude to life could be like, oh gosh, another day. Or your attitude to life could be like, oh my God, I made it through my sleep. It's like nothing discontinued. My eyes are awake. Let's go, conscious state. Like, sure, like there's many ways that the mind can unravel. But for me, it's about I ran towards an external truth only to find a mirror. And when I found that mirror, I realized that what was looking in the mirror was not something that was shaped. That means, yes, the body is shaped. The eye biologically has a shape. But that which was looking through my eyes in the mirror was not shaped. It was will. It was like I was seeing how my breath was being my free will. Just my a conscious moment was just as if intelligence is here now. We underestimate ourselves as creatures, you know. For atoms, we're doing pretty well, I think. For cells, for just being cells, I think we have kind of returned to a sort of crystallization of a sort of pattern of intelligence. Now, I feel the planet is getting a tan every day, and it's rotating, which is even more unique, as if the planet is designed to have every part of it hit the sun. And due to the cyclical nature of the cosmos, we have a cyclical psychology. How fascinating. Because the planet goes through cycles, man's mind can never be stable even if he chooses to. The world will change to a point. So eventually it becomes riding change as your attention. Realizing prior to any thought, before you learned language as a kid, you were a creature of pure attention. And even prior to that, even if we want to go prior to even the child develops a strong emotional intelligence. This is why children, the younger they are, the more they need to be hugged, like honorably hugged, you know, to be as if like you make the simple actions. How can I tell you? It's like this is life. Anything that a person can do, it may have a consequence, and if the person doing the action is just aware of the consequence, they can do something about it. So I think the purpose of many just parental activities around the world, just when I'm kind of looking at the future generations, and I realize it's about like the eyes that have raised these eyes sharing with these eyes what they have seen. It's called like I remember there was a friend who his name shall be T. And anyways, this kid, I'll just tell you the part of the conversation. He said that when he was a kid, his father made him realize the capital of every country, and he was a very kind of disciplined guy, you know. And I noticed that it's incredible because the right intensity applied to the mind can lead to success, but at the same time, the wrong intensity attempted at the wrong archetype can lead to distress. You see, it's like we have to say it like this: the youth have a chance that those who have ran many laps around the sun don't. And what is that chance? They can hover in the illusion of greatness before they come to the realization of how the actual system is. I want during that hovering of that kind of illusion of greatness by looking ahead. It may be the scariest thing is that man is telling a story in a void, but it is also the most profound thing. Our minds have now evolved beyond even a subjective presence. What is the self? If it's individual, of course, it's only looking at a collective path. If you think you're a collective being right now, guess what? Your attention is going to go to the individual. We are oscillating between various states. So the wisdom becomes not just like, okay, tell me a sentence, I'll listen to this for the rest of my life. It's like there's no such thing wisdom like that. That's blindness. Every moment changes, and you have to. It's as if like sometimes you got to slow down the future to advance the efficiency of the present moment. When I noticed what mindfulness was, I laughed for a long time. And I realized I have been living too fast in my mind. Living too fast in your mind, you know what it does? It makes you feel out of control if you can't maintain it. Mr. Within is saying that just if every child realized we're all reacting to emptiness, how much more compassion would you have? How much would you realize that hidden battle is with the creature existing as a moment of value? And of course, the civilization, I don't want to say it's failing us, but it's as if it's asleep. It's as if the human mind is calling the civilization. It's like, make everything more resourceful, and the civilization is like still asleep. It's like the slumber of a machine forgotten. It's kind of chaotic. Well, what it is that human nature has to now realize the next evolution is an inner one, and it's through language. And that means all external wars should, to some degree, immediately end, because what we are harboring within ourselves is like next level. It's like the greatest resource is not a piece of paper. The greatest resource is, in some sense, the opportunity for the new to arise. And that's what the mind of people are for. You have to realize, like, I loved Buckminster Fuller's attitude on this. They asked him, why do you invent? And he's like, I just go on inventing stuff, man. And one day people will find their utility, their use. As if, think about it, he was like beast mode. What I mean, he's like no, no, he went as far as like what do you call it? What's his name? Beethoven. Mozart's will was strange. Mozart was like incredibly gifted person, but his will could have taken him beyond. He could have been inspiration that Beethoven couldn't fathom. You know. But I'll tell you this: every mind sees the world, and what they see is what they see and what they can utilize. Your sight becomes kind of. I started treating my conscious state as a temple. Do you know what that means? I went from a person like being even rough enough to hold grudges and like heavy intentions against people. And this was not, again, when I say against people, I mean like when I was in an argument, I wouldn't hold back, and I would later regret it. It's as if my soul would weep the next day. My eyes wouldn't, but my soul would. Like there would be parts of me that would shake a little. So it's as if, and that was because it was attitudes of rudeness, not nothing ever violent. Somehow I think I was blessed to kind of avoid a lot of violence. But the reality is that the mind is way more superior than turbulence of matter. What I'm trying to say is that people just need stories to get by to the next day. Not just that they need stories, they need it's not like it's like nobody can save anyone because in some sense they don't have the eyes of anyone, but they can attempt to communicate something. I think these will be the kind of phases of the evolution of the civilization. The eras of language worship end. The subjective evolution that occurred simultaneously. When the objective evolution reached its end, it turned into a subjective evolution. When the subjective evolution occurred, that was the first moment free will took over the controls of the living being. Before, it wasn't in the control of the living being. So the subjective evolution was the birth of will. So the birth of will occurred when this object could realize, or at least what was within this object, the attention could consider itself more distant, separate. The concept of dualism was born when the free will emerged. I like it. Free will emerged first, then duality arose. So this duality has now complexified to such a degree that every human being in the world is living in accordance to some story that life has become for them. So now Mr. Within is saying if every human being could provide 10% of their playful attention to just wondering what would be a great ambition for the mind of civilization. That means all 8 billion minds, imagine you're the captain of the ship, what would be your solution? And I feel every human being must write that book and give it to a place where eventually those ideas will be acknowledged. You see, something unique is happening. Technology is advancing incredibly. Human beings have an imagination that, unless, let's say, they have a subjective realm where, unless they communicate it, that subjective realm is gone or never seen or whatnot. So what is happening is we have created this incredible computing power, but all the experiences that the person goes through, like that are internal, have to be communicated. So what are ways that it can be communicated? Of course, some people draw art, and some people kind of write, and some people do many other kind of creative expressions like drumming or something, like, you know. So there's many ways people approach this, but I find that it's the responsibility of the human mind to share its greatest vision with the species, as a book. And then abide by the realization that in order to bring about a better world, you got to kind of make that world real. It's like, if you have how can I say it? It's like we are in the era where stories will emotionally balance us, then we will, in a content way, I think, return to what I would like to say Yoda understood as the Force. Another way of saying it's just conscious energy. A moment where what you are is existence's greatest attempt, now giving you the torch of free will. Your free will means that when you look at this cosmos, are you allowed to be here or are you not? Are you allowed to receive here or are you not? Are you allowed to express here or are you not? As these inner kind of skies are shattered, Resolution comes in the one's true nature, which is that which was always there. You remember yourself out of an idea that was lost in a guilty story. The species has incredible emotional turbulence. The emotional turbulence is because the mind of the human being is not being acknowledged. The fear of the children of the future generations, that will they just be a statistic or not? Will they be something more? I feel that fear will emerge when the illusion gets too juicy. So what does that mean? That culture is making humanity think that objectivity is the only thing to pay attention to, not realizing that we are catapulting ourselves into an intense confrontation with the unknown. The ancient Greeks saw the cosmos starting in ancient Greek mythology from chaos, and then order arose. And so we find this unconscious, chaotic movement of nature, but suddenly order arose. This order inevitably realizes is as now, regardless of its thought structure in the moment, regardless of how the moment is, it is acknowledging that it's as if like it is a journey. When life is a journey, you begin to realize respecting 8 billion journeyers. And it's like the effort becomes to advance the experience. And I feel that the mind will get bored, but I thought, what if we make this kind of like the Colosseum, a gladiator sort of arena for minds, where the greatest ideas around the world are just through very civil and advanced kind of dialogue occurring. What it is that the planet is becoming globalized. It's like obviously there's too many people, so all these people will eventually be integrated. So eventually means in a long period. So what that means is enjoy every moment and be respectful to change, but at the same time, there may be a kid in a poverty stricken country that is the next Einstein. And that kid is like, what the hell is human civilization? What is this? Am I left behind? And we have to realize, even if that kid gets out of poverty, what kind of civilization is it coming to? What grand story is there that this civilization is inspiring the human being to wake up and be like, okay, let's do something? It's as if it's like, I understand the freedom of art, but I also understand the sacrifice of discipline. When I looked at my grandparents, when I realized as they are getting older, they feel closer to emptiness, I went and immediately did something for my grandfather where I just interviewed him and recorded his voice. And I felt that it would kind of help them. It would help them in their views. There's something in life that the greater you rise, the greater the fall. And this is where, in reality, that point when the person moves beyond the threshold of their conscience, what that means is like Frodo steps beyond the Shire, that's when free will fragments itself. The attention in the moment starts as simple being, and eventually, as movement is done, various subject, there comes certain thoughts get momentum into activating as like the context of the moment. So it's a completely new relationship. We human beings are not like creatures like the what was that movie, X-Men, right? We're not like that, but we have something unique, that because we each see a vision of the world, we have the unique factor. At least we have the unique, not we might not have the power part, but we have the unique factor, just like the X-Men show, right? Now, in regards to the mind, if the mind, regardless of its advancement or not, can implement an action, it means its choice can redirect the attention. So sometimes in a battlefield where language is, in some sense, ideologically possessing people, so in those situations, you just get the person out, and even if the person has an ego, you push the ego out of the battlefield. Because let me tell you, reality has to do with if the creature feels they can trust the moment or not. If you don't trust the moment, guess what? You're gonna freak out. If you distrust the moment, you're gonna freak out. But if you trust the moment, you're like, okay, I'm a creature of design and I'm walking. Your mind keeps standing in this universe because its vision is beyond it. I find that a total new revolution should occur in psychology. I find that psychology has been carrying a great burden, both for not just psychologists, philosophers, poets, but I think we are now reaching a point in civilization where it's fascinating. It's as if the student, we are oscillating back into the polymath mind, a kind of realizing all the branches of knowledge come from the same trunk. So it's a very unique kind of, I don't know, I feel like you care for what is alive, and karma honors you. You don't care for what is alive. And when I say what is alive, like when you see a human being on a street, you're seeing a creature that you have no idea what experiences have made that being. And so what that means is it's like they have sort of certain known factors and unknown factors. And because there's unknown factors, reality will seem the social communication will seem like simulation like. But beyond the language threshold and sincere moments of silence, experience is re-envisioned in some sense. But I hold true that it is emptiness. I feel there is emptiness, and this empty. I feel there's empty. It's what. How can I tell you? Right now, as I'm speaking, I cannot avoid my objective journey, and I cannot avoid, to some degree, the thoughts that arise and come and go. Reality seems to me just an opportunity for a creature to just attempt effort. Like deep down, if the eyes were closed and they're like, "What's the purpose of life?" You'd be just whatever there is to push, and that push is not to it's not arrogance, but it's the ability of the will to stand. Kind of in like the last samurai movie, there was that American guy, like American Sergeant or whatever. Like he because he wanted. It was a kind of strange mindset. It's like because he wasn't afraid of death, right? He was functioning at his full ability. And so he would go into this fight where he was like, of course, there was a scene where he gets beat down by the samurai with like a wooden stick, but he still keeps getting back up. And the samurai are realizing this is a person who has understood the will beyond the objective being. So, what it is you start caring for the members of your civilization that, regardless of how they display themselves, deep down maybe reacting to emptiness, in of their own intensity, right? So this is what happens is it becomes this new system, cultural system of honoring the mind, and pretty much realizing that the moment is divided between what is known and what is unknown. When you realize the unknown and you can simply honor it, something strange happens. You can consciously see your known limits and comfortably see more. Fear is like somebody put a picture in front of your eyes and you can't see what's going on in the room. The past put a picture in front of your eyes. That's fear. Life, because of its unknown factor, is really a mystical place. Really, there's no such thing as a mystic. There's just a person who's looking at the world, realizing that the person and the self and the world are codependent. We require on our external environments to live, and guess what? Your sense of subjective self also requires kind of inner environment to adjust. And so many people don't care about their inner environment. They never wonder if they're a mind that has a unique ability, that if they just stopped acting a loop, like a hamster in a wheel, maybe they might suddenly rediscover who they are in a way where they realize there's a freedom to be here. So what does that mean? That means this is truly what I would say. We are not an advanced civilization, but we are, our communication is advanced as a civilization. That's one thing I want to kind of realize. It's honestly the greatest banner we can have. We are creatures that allow the inner realities, the, like, imagine people's minds are antennas of various ideas, and so it's like we allow these outer ideas to be received externally. So what it is reality is becoming made into a theater. That means eventually people want to settle down into a story to live for. Now, many people live for themselves, of course, but I feel that this is the civilization part where, and I am still kind of trying to, as far as I've gotten, is that the greatest clue I got to the next great vision of civilization, how civilization will look like, is that it needs emotional stability. And this emotional stability will allow a sort of clearance for the mind. This sort of clearance will suddenly make the person no longer obsessed with their inner self. So when they're no longer obsessed with their inner self, there always comes a time when the inner and the outer fuse and become a single moment. And then there comes also a time where that single moment acknowledges emptiness. Then there comes a time where that single moment is prior to its emptiness. And it's like even you go prior to emptiness, and that's when there's a sort of inconceivable presence of being. That inconceivable presence being is not like the edge of it's not like the edge of a simulation. It's simply that there's a way the attention can move in the moment, that the more still and silent it becomes, the less it requires to, um, the mind begins to move at a greater speed. But when the person speaks, that's reducing the speed of the mind as well. Eventually life will become a balance between the chaos and order of your mind. There's this poet named Rumi. He says a bird needs two wings to fly, and he says the mind requires chaos in order to function. And I was like, oh my God, all these people fighting chaos, all this chaos disturbing order. And I'm like, wow, the both wings are required. But now it's like, by acknowledging the emptiness, emotional stability becomes a priority. By making emotional stability a priority, we will, I feel it, we will kind of we will revolutionize our experience as beings with language. As our language evolves, the behaviors and culture evolve. As the behaviors and culture evolve, the system listens to itself and regoverns its whole mind. So what we're treating the man and the citizen and the politics as a mind where what the species cares for is the greatest idea at the right time, at the greatest time. So what it is becomes a call of action where we have this hall of ideas, the hall of great ideas of humanity. And this kind of hall will be a sort of global platform where we're like, okay, the inner designs must become externalized, the external designs will be processed. Behavior has to do with certain, how the will is, because it's free, it can do many things. So on some level, because people are living in their own worlds, unless they choose to see something more, they will not see it. It's kind of like, this is how where love truly blooms, when you can see, you can give the same freedom that you give your own heart to someone else's heart. You can give the same freedom, you give your own mind to that other person's mind, and not to be not cautious, but in some sense realizing that it's freedom. And the freedom must be balanced, I find. So what does that mean? That means a person's mind paints a story that they can see. Regardless of the story you're painting, valuing life, becoming sensitive to the living, is like the result of that will become a space safe enough for the greatest ideas of mankind to step out from behind our eyes. It's like the call of writers. Every human being can be a writer as a sort of this call to kind of last humanity's last kind of writers are like warriors of the mind, and it's like humanity's last effort kind of inner extinction scenario, where unless the inner realities are given freedom to be communicated and expressed, it's as if like what we want to do is not focus about fighting over color, but to increase the colors of the world. What does that mean? That means to realize that every moment, of course, every plant in the garden is grown in a certain way. Does that mean the garden should fight over territory? I don't think so. What it means is that every creature has a design where they can share something. I mean, why are you a human being if there was no point to humanity? You know, it's like why is this design here? We see birds fly together, we see fish swim together, we see wolves run together, we see many species being in some co-harmony. But of course, we as kind of the free will of now is governed in its own bubble of like privacy and sphere. But we're still realizing that it's like in a multidimensional landscape, there can come this new initiative to wonder about what it would be like that if man attempts to create a collective narrative, an ultimate collective narrative. It's like it's not just King Arthur at the picking the thing. It's like before picking King Arthur, like the whole world is going there. So that's I want the attention of the whole planet to realize that we want to create a state where the mind of man is free, yet the biology is not forgotten under an uncontrollable mechanical technology. So it becomes an evolutionary return to nature because certain unconscious desires are speeding up too much for the civilization. We should treat civilization as kind of like the human body, like the stomach. What does that mean? That means in certain moments it can't just keep eating the same food or it'll get sick. That means we can't just have purely just 100% at full throttle technological innovation. Because if we did, it's as if like too much of the same food, it's like there's going to be sickness, there's going to be inefficiency. But the thing is that the creature navigates, it eats for a little while, it technologically advances and then takes a vacation for like 100 years of no technological progress. And then after that 100 years, there's 100 years allowed of technological progress, then 100 years no longer. It's this constant evolutionary cyclical return to nature that will preserve the human mind so we evolve beside our world and also outside of it. I think this is a very crucial idea because imagine then what kind of culture would develop. It would be a culture of people who are more acquainted to nature and a culture of people who are more acquainted to technological realms. And so now imagine these kind of people communicating. It's like the child of both worlds was greater than both. Anyways, guys, this talk was very important for me personally. If it was your first time listening, welcome to the talk. Um, I give these talks when inspiration arises, when the idea is there. When the idea isn't there, I have this rule where I don't pick up the pen until there's something important enough, to write about. I've kind of realized life is a relationship with self, and also life is a relationship with the other. And just like how one's relationship with themselves can be known and can also be unknown, there's unknown factors to your intelligence. That's why it's like, what are we measuring on the test? So, so it becomes one of those things where, whew, where one frees themselves from the idea of themselves and the idea of their world, and realizes a sort of presence of attention that's attributeless. In that attributeless presence of attention, silent observance returns and abides by its nature. The ancestors, the future generations, 2019 will be. It's like from this year on, the next 100 years, there will be such. I feel it just coming. It's strange. I feel it's like this inner renaissance is simply arising because of new dimensions of freedom and experience. Eventually, this is fascinating. A global identity will be established by the individual mind. Wow. That means you're associating as a member of not just your species, but as a uh, existential, experiential emissary of the whole cosmos in one moment. We are, nature, and we are natural beings that are aware of the cosmos. So we are, in some sense, cosmic awareness. I'm just saying that this opens up dimensions of patience, tolerance, and wisdom for the human being when they realize every human being has to acknowledge emptiness, and they really seek emotional stability. And I've noticed something fascinating, that when you go into an environment, now look at what could realistically happen. Either, first of all, the environment is either engaged or not. The second thing is, if the environment is engaged, what is engaging what? Right? And if the person is in a mindset where they are still not interested in the moment, they will, in some sense, they are welcomed in a place where they are not welcoming themselves. Right? So it's one of those things where I'm saying it's like the relationship man has with his environment has to become something where the person immediately realizes, what am I projecting in what I see, and what is actually there. So silence and stillness and patience becomes like, I remember my grandpa saying something hilarious. He told me, anytime you're in a business meeting, like a giant business meeting, let everybody speak first. Even if they tell you it's your turn, you'd like, I'd like to hear this gentleman, and let everybody speak first. And after you have heard what everybody has said, then say the new thing you want to say. And I was like, wow, that's like, I could totally see he was an industrial man, like he owned a factory and whatnot. Like he pioneered, like, at least gave life to a certain sector, pioneered a certain sector of, the Iranian leather industry, like back in the day. But what I'm saying is, like, it was a sort of being aware of what's there. So what I'm saying is, the future generations look at where they came from, and they see their ancestors attempting their greatest, and in some sense bringing about the fascinating. I don't know how to say it, but I feel like people are still treating themselves as an object. They haven't realized there's a sort of subjective generation of intelligence in every moment. It's like with every heartbeat, it's like, guess what? It's like a new moment. So, anyways, guys, this psychological kind of analysis, which is the title, and how I find emotional stability is the solution to the liberation of the mind of man from his savage inner realms to the clarity of the outer realms. And I find what occurs is, believe it or not, I think this is why Jordan Peterson has steered the right direction, is responsibility. And responsibility, even we make it more simpler, it's your ability to respond as a being. So you have a great ability to respond as a being to your moment, and once you realize, like the same, imagine, look at like imagine, like you're giving yourself how much freedom. Like if I tell you, like pick an object in a room, you pick it up, and you're like, okay, look, you have freedom, objective freedom. Now guess what? Why are you not giving your mind subjective freedom? Now ethics, morality, and all this again can be burdens. You know, a person can have a backpack with one book in it, a person can have a backpack with like 10 books in it, a person can have a backpack with no books in it, a person cannot even have a backpack. So in reality, there's various ways that archetypes are even so dependent on the state of the attention of the being. The moment the person's attention just changes a little bit, there a new archetype can form. So I treat it kind of like my conscious state is like attention to moment. Attention to moment is attention to reality. The term language threshold, I've coined this to kind of say that it's a moment in life where we have an experience that we can't speak about. That means even our linguistic truths, all truths written on paper, they are hovering in the void. Just like how the planet is hovering in the middle of nowhere, you know, language is also sparked like a fire. This doesn't mean language is meaningless, but it just means it does have a hollowness for all those people, ideologic people possessed. They're like, whoa, where'd the problem go? It's as if before the answer came, the problem vanished. I noticed that there's a leap in generations. And what does that mean? That means children see the mistakes of their ancestry, but they also see how they handled those mistakes. Efficient vision, emotional stability, freedom of choice, an open mind, the will to see, and the acceptance that holds all. Accepting your true nature doesn't mean there you have to hide your eyes from the shadow. It means that life moves in different ways, but what does civilization need? It needs freedom to return to nature and freedom to step out of it. And that's when we will be an advanced civilization. When we have not forgotten nature. 50% of life is not done in streets or rooms. Like I hope there comes a day where there's like a person walking and suddenly they feel stress or something, and the person just sits down, closes their eyes for 10 to 20 minutes, not thinking about anything, and then wonders about what's going on. And the person suddenly handles the inner reality instantly in that moment. So guys, the chat section will be open and I will engage it, but I feel I will end the talk here. Um, And I feel I should share one more story. There was a story in mind I had today where I'm like, I felt like I had to share this in a talk. I can feel the story, but I can't pinpoint it. I'll tell you this story though. There were these two Zen monks, like Zen students in a monastery, and for lunch they had come to kind of clean their wooden um, plates of food, like wooden, rice bowls of food, you know. So as these two friends are there, instantly as they arrive by the side of the river, there's a scorpion right by the edge of the river that's like a tourist that's made a wrong turn, and it's like it's falling into the water. And instantly, one of these monks quickly grabs his wooden bowl and just quickly scoops the scorpion out from being pulled by the water. And the scorpion stings him, and he puts down the plate. And then his friend sees him and it's like doesn't say anything. It's like there's a respectful silence of presence. Then the friend, that guy who like he goes to grab the bowl again, the main guy, and he has to free the scorpion who can't get out of the bowl. And as he does it, the scorpion stings him and runs out of the bowl. And his friend looks at him and suddenly says something profound. And he's like, "My friend, why do you keep trying to save that scorpion when its nature is to sting? Why do you keep trying to save that scorpion? Why does the order endlessly try to continue in the chaos?" The friend looks at the guy who asked that question and he says, what does he say? He says, "Because it's my nature to save it. Just like that scorpion is designed in this cosmos to sting, it is man's mind designed to continue. It's as if evolution was not an idea, it was a legend still continuing." So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. And I'm happy I completed this talk. This is this reaction to emptiness explains all psychology. And those who are fearless can see a path when fear has blinded many. So be fearless in your life means trust your life, trust your intelligence. It's not measurable, yet it has to do with your vision and advancement and how much you actually care for what your intelligence is. It's as if like there are certain hidden gifts that must be opened through honest living. It's weird, but like I feel there's something like that. When you abide by your true nature, it's as if when you listen to the nature of the world within, you can finally stand on a rock in space and look at things anew. Much blessings and namaste. Thanks for listening, guys.